Wait, I thought that everyone hated Blake Lively. What is going on? What is the situation? Reminder patrons, you already have the uncensored, extended director's cut version of this available for you. Everyone else, you get the more censored version because, when we're dealing with subject matters like this, we have to. It Ends With Us, the movie, came out in August of 2024, and yes, I have to say 2024 because we're literally a few days away from 2025 as of filming. The movie starred Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Baldoni is co-chair and co-owner of Wayfarer Studios. Therefore, that makes him the owner of the film as well as the producer and the director. You certainly do, Baldoni. The movie is based on the Colleen Hoover book of the same name, and the subject matter of the book is of an abusive relationship, and it's not something that I personally like to romanticize, which is why it's not really my cup of tea, personally, but I'm not gonna yuck your yum. Okay, so I did do a giant video literally last week. This video here is also a fundraiser, and it's about all of the horrible things that actually happen in an abusive relationship and how we need to break the cycles of what patriarchy has taught us. Huge video, please go watch it. I really want to raise as much money as possible with that video. I'm sure you've seen many content creators say how terrible the marketing of this movie was. Like, why on earth was Blake Lively all about flowers, all about empowerment for a movie that's about domestic abuse? Like, the subject matter isn't all that happy, so then why is she leaning into this? Wait, where's Justin? I thought that he was starring with her. But wait a second, he went and did a separate press junket without the other cast members? Okay, well, that's fine because he was talking about the victims of abuse, all of the very serious topics that come up in the movie, and how he wants to be there for victims. Justin was even honored by Vital Voices, a global non-profit organization which focuses on empowering women, with a Women's Solidarity Award earlier this month because he has consistently kept the focus on victims of abuse. He's also presented himself as an ally to women, writing books, co-hosting a podcast with Mr. Heath, and giving talks on toxic masculinity. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry who the good guy and bad guy was in this situation, right? Well, it turns out he may actually be fitting in with this crowd here because he seems to be a bit of a fake feminist, allegedly. But according to this legal complaint, he was sexually harassing and bullying Blake during the production of the movie. This is where I have to thank one of my subscribers, Lisa, because she kindly sent me the New York Times article which did this big investigation which actually unearthed all of this. That was written by Megan Toohey, Mike McIntyre and Julie Tate. Great work, you three. I'm not going to read the full 80-page legal complaint to you. I will give you some of the highlights of things I think it's worthwhile you noting about what Blake was actually having to put up with on set. Blake had issues with Baldoni right from the start. The writer's strike put filming on hold, and Blake organised a meeting for January before filming was going to be able to continue because she needed to have some boundaries made because this is the stuff that she was dealing with. A few weeks before filming began, and less than 4 months after Blake had given birth to her fourth child, she was humiliated to learn that Justin Baldoni secretly called her fitness trainer without her knowledge or permission and implied he wanted her to lose weight within 2 weeks. He said that he was concerned about having to pick Blake up for a scene of the movie, but there was no such scene. And when she caught strep throat, he offered her a gift to connect her with an expert to get probiotics to combat the sickness. And when she went to fill out the privacy forms, it was a weight loss specialist instead. So she felt like he was shaming her. There was a COVID outbreak on set, but they didn't follow COVID protocols because apparently they didn't have insurance coverage for COVID. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath deliberately withheld from Blake that she had been exposed to COVID, and both Blake and her infant child contracted COVID from the outbreak. Not many people are reporting on this, but you know how much my life has been affected by COVID. That's why I wanted to include this. Allegedly, Wayfarer Studios didn't have industry protocols in place for filming intimate scenes, which led to some very terrible things happening to Blake on screen. There was a kissing scene which hadn't been rehearsed or choreographed or discussed with Blake, and no intimacy coordinator involved, and he bit and sucked on her lower lip during a scene. He also insisted on retaking the scene multiple times. In another scene where they were filming a slow dance, he got out of his character of Ryle and instead was just being himself. He dragged his lips from her ear down her neck and said, "It smells so good." This was not in character or based on any dialogue in the script. When she objected to what he did, his response was, "I'm not even attracted to you." Allegedly, after Blake had signed on to the draft of the script, Justin decided to add in different scenes which added graphic content, including a scene in which she was meant to on camera. She objected to it, and he said that he was doing it to make the film through the female gaze, and he really wanted to make sure that the couple all came together on their wedding night. He then asked Blake if she and Ryan could act simultaneously during but she found invasive and refused to discuss. Oh my goodness, why the hell are you asking your employee? Because remember, he's in charge of this movie. Why are you asking her about this stuff? What the hell? Brandon just overheard me recording this and he said, what a creep. When it comes to sex scenes, I know that there's been a lot of conversation about this, but there needs to be a reason for them to be on screen. And also when it comes to underage stuff, can we just not? Is it really needed in this? Because I don't think it is. Baldoni was also insisting to Blake that women give birth naked. Bearing in mind, Blake has 4 children, so I think that she may know how she would have children. And this was even suggested to her literally on the day of filming by both Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath, pressuring her to do this, and it wasn't talked about at all prior, with Justin insisting that women give birth naked and that his wife had ripped her clothes off. She felt forced into a compromise so that she would be from the chest down for filming. And then even worse, Mr. Heath even showed her a video of a fully nude woman with her legs spread apart. She thought that it was that he was showing her, and he explained it was the video of his wife giving birth. She was shocked, and he replied saying she isn't weird about this stuff, as if Blake was the weird one for not wanting to see this. And when they were filming the scene, they didn't have standard industry protections in place. They didn't even have a closed set, allowing non-essential crew to pass through whilst she was mostly nude with her legs spread apart in stirrups with only a small piece of fabric covering her. She wasn't even given anything to cover herself between takes, even though she made multiple requests. Justin's best friend was going to be playing the role of the obgyn, who would literally have his head right there in that intimate place, and she felt it was humiliating. Then we've got classic workplace sexual harassment, where he's calling people in the workplace sexy, specifically women. He told a female cast member her leather pants look sexy. He said, oh, well, I can say that because my wife is here today. And then he did this to Blake as well when she was breastfeeding, and he wanted to see her onesie under it because it revealed her lace bra. And then he said, I think you look sexy, in a tone that made her feel ogled and exposed. And she said, that's not what I'm going for. And he bristled and said, I'm sorry, hot. To which she replied, not that either. And he responded sarcastically, I guess I missed the HR meeting. And I'm positive many of you watching right now can recall when this exact sort of thing has happened to you or to people around you in the workplace, and you're just meant to laugh and shrug it off. And the last thing I want to bring up in this video is the complete lack of boundaries of Mr. Heath and Mr. Baldoni allegedly entering into Blake's trailer while she's having body makeup removed or body makeup put on, or when she's breastfeeding because she wasn't given breaks to feed her baby, bearing in mind she'd just had a baby 4 months before filming. She called Mr. Heath out for staring directly at her while she was topless, and when she called him out, he brushed her off as wanting to look at a person while speaking to them. And both Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath showed a shocking lack of boundaries by invading her personal space when she was undressed and vulnerable. And I'm sorry, but not allowing a new mother to be able to breastfeed her child, like having breaks for that built in, is utterly shocking to me. I think that we can all agree at the very least that none of this alleged stuff was workplace appropriate. But of course they deny that any of this happened, even with screenshots of texts and everything else. So when we see this repeated pattern of behaviour and the fact that they had actually agreed to all of the requests made in the meeting and that they were going to be changing their behaviour going forward, it makes sense why they'd be feeling a little bit guilty and a little bit scared of what Blake might do afterwards. Hence the start of an alleged smear campaign. And he allegedly used the same PR company which supported Johnny Depp in the whole Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. Don't know, this niche little thing, you may have heard of it. They've also represented Drake and Travis Scott. And I don't know about you, but that's not really a client list that you want to be amongst, in my opinion. Sara Nathan is a PR expert who specialises in crisis management. It's a bit like being the lawyer who's always happy to defend the bad guy, representing the likes of Logan Paul, the Chainsmokers, Hybe America, and in case you don't know who Hybe America are, Hybe represents a lot of K-pop bands, and Hybe America have Scooter Braun, yes, that same Scooter Braun, as their CEO. These are all red flags, but she also fielded press inquiries for Tiffany Trump, and she was also investigated during this time. So that's what you need to know about Melissa for now. We'll get more into her later. So allegedly, he wanted to come up with the messages that he wanted to spread about her so that she didn't have a leg to stand on, therefore, diminishing any credibility that she had. In other words, a smear campaign. And my God, did people lap it up. Now, I want to remind you that they were instructed to promote the movie in this way. In the legal complaint, this is shown as Exhibit C, and it says to focus more on Lily's strength and resilience as opposed to describing the film as a story about domestic violence, and to avoid talking about this film that makes it feel sad or heavy as a story of hope. Pause the screen if you want to read the full document, or it is linked for you down below. And from all that I've read about what she's allegedly had happen to her, as someone who has gone through not quite what she did at all to that level, but as someone who has been at a workplace and you just want to get things over and done with and want to be as far away from the person as possible, and actually people as possible, then it makes perfect sense to me why you'd just be like, okay, I'm just going to do exactly what they say. I'm just going to get this done because I want to put this all behind me. It's not a nice situation having to continually see those people. If I was her, I would be doing exactly what I did, which was having panic attacks and just crying and unable to actually see that person at all. So I would personally say this took a lot of strength for them to be able to continue doing the press junket, even though Justin wasn't involved in that. But that's me personally, speaking from personal experience. I would have done the same thing as what Blake did in this scenario. But it wasn't just about how the movie was marketed that people took issue with. Suddenly there was a whole flurry of videos popping up with every bad thing that Blake Lively had ever done. It was this sudden, almost cancellation movement that was happening. People were digging up stuff from her past. She's been on our screens since she was a kid, really. I think she's 1 year older than me. People trawled through the archives to dig up every possible way that they could show that Blake Lively was, in fact, a terrible person. They wanted her name ruined. Well, it could have been they as in a coordinated attack, or it could have been they as in like the fact that we do love to dogpile on people. You have to admit it too. There's definitely a lot of that we see. They unearthed the fact that she and Ryan Reynolds got married at a plantation, that she used to romanticize the Southern Belle in the past. Also, when it comes to plantations, why are they still called that as opposed to forced labor camps? Because that's literally what they were. It doesn't make sense to me, because that would really help stop people from romanticizing any of it to begin with. And she had awkward standoffish interviews where she wasn't a nice lady. And people discovered that she was allegedly the other woman, because I don't know if you know this, but Scarlett Johansson and Ryan Reynolds used to be married. However, she wasn't the other woman. Like, the timelines don't actually show that. I will admit I fell for this too until I was fact checking for this video, because that was one of the reasons that I didn't like her all those years ago, because this happened in 2010. Like I said, she's 1 year older than me, so I kind of remember this time. Blake and Ryan did meet whilst filming Green Lantern. Blake was in a relationship with Penn Badgley at the time. They broke up in September of 2010, and Scarlett and Ryan divorced in December of that year. But Blake went on to date Leonardo DiCaprio the following year. Oh dear, poor thing. It was only in October of the next year that Blake and Ryan did actually start dating. So I stand corrected, happy to eat that piece of humble pie. From what we see, it looks like Blake and Ryan are happily married. It looks like they've got a very happy family together, and that's great. Personally, I think that Scarlett is a little bit more intellectual than Ryan, but that could just be me being judgmental. I don't know. Maybe he was also a bit bitter about the fact that she had a better career than him. Like, think about the Green Lantern. Did anybody like that? No. But Bryony, how do you know that a smear campaign was orchestrated? A brand marketing consultant, Tarakeet, produced a report in August for Ms. Lively that concluded she had been the object of a targeted multi-channel online attack, similar to one against Ms. Heard, and that it was damaging her reputation. The report did not identify who was behind the attack, but by analysing the entirety of Google Search's index for Ms. Lively's name, it found that 35% of the results also included a reference to Mr. Baldoni. This was highly unusual given the length of her career, the company said, and suggested that the media environment was being manipulated. And then this is where we bring in Jennifer Abel, Justin's publicist, who is actually just quit 2 days ago, Melissa Nathan, the person that we talked about earlier, and her sister Sara Nathan, who is an award-winning editor-at-large who's worked for The Sun, People Magazine, Daily Mail, dailymail.com, and is currently at New York Post. And she also used to be the Page 6 features editor. It's almost like she could be incredibly well connected in the industry. And then this is where all three women get tied together, because on the 31st of July 2024, Jennifer Abel and Mr. Baldoni got the crisis communication specialist, Melissa Nathan, and her company, the agency group, or TAG, where she also proposed the creation of social fan engagement to go back and forth with any negative accounts, helping to change the narrative and stay on track. All of this will most importantly be untraceable. On the 1st of August, Jen met with a friend who was a contributor for People, Fox News, In Touch, and US Weekly magazine, and they're armed and ready to take this story of Blake weaponizing feminism and ensured Mr. Heath that the contributor will do anything for us. In the text it says, "She hates Blake, has heard this story before." But Justin thought the plan didn't go far enough and wanted things to go further. Jen relayed to Melissa that Mr. Baldoni wants to feel like Ms. Lively can be buried. And Melissa says, we can't write down that we will destroy her. Imagine if a document saying all the things he wants ends up in the wrong hands. But Melissa reassured them, saying, you know we can bury anyone. On the 4th of August, Jen was texting Melissa saying, I'm having reckless thoughts of wanting to plant pieces about how horrible Blake is to work with just to get ahead of this. And Melissa said that she's spoken off the record to the editor of Daily Mail because she's my friend. He's ready when we are. And then Justin sends a text to Jen saying this is what we would need, highlighting an article about Hailey Bieber and how terrible of a person she is. 8th of August, everything was gearing up with off-the-record conversations with outlets happening. Jen noted it's because of Melissa's relationships with those outlets, they were being kept at bay. And then on the 9th of August is when Melissa talked with Sara, her sister, at the New York Post, and said Justin's religion should be taken out from media coverage, and mostly the word misogynistic. 10th of August, the day after the release of the film, they notice a shift in the narrative, with Melissa saying the majority of socials are so pro-Justin, and I don't even agree with half of them, lol. There had been a couple of articles saying about the HR issue, but Jen said the narrative online is so freaking good and fans are sticking up for Justin. There's literally no pickup of those 2 articles, which is actually shocking to me, but I see this as a total success, as does Justin. You did such amazing work. Which Melissa replied, narrative is crazy good. So did you. Melissa continued, I mean, that was just a lot of work, just talking everyone off the ledge for those 2 pieces. He doesn't even realize how lucky he is right now. We need to press him on just how the whispering in the air, the sexual connotations, like Jesus. Other members feeling uncomfortable watching him, I mean there is just so much. And Jen texted Justin, nothing, very little pickup. Fans remain supportive of you and believe the issue of the feud is because she took over control of the movie. Melissa said, it's actually sad because it just shows you how people really want to hate on women. Then on the 13th of August, it was Jen and Sara, Melissa's sister, who were texting about a story outlining Lively's role in making final cuts of the film. And on that same day, the article was published in Page 6, which is owned by New York Post. The language in the article is almost a verbatim copy of the language exchanged between Sara and Jen. But then on the 14th of August, the media outlets were inquiring directly about the HR complaints made on set, because they were told there were at least 3 HR complaints filed against Justin Baldoni. And so Melissa and Jen wanted to know about the HR complaints in order to counter the press. But don't worry, because on the 16th of August, the Daily Mail article is Blake Lively set to be cancelled. String of hard-to-watch videos that have surfaced following tone-deaf Q&A to promote It Ends With Us could tarnish 36-year-old star's golden Hollywood image for good. Remember who has friends at the Daily Mail? Everybody was so happy with it. Jen said to Melissa, you really outdid yourself with this piece. Melissa said, that's why you hired me, right? I'm the best. I really wanted to lay out this timeline for you so you could properly see all of the manipulation that happened behind the scenes. And this is one way where we're actually able to see it because this was subpoenaed, which gives us access to it. And it's almost more sickening to me because this is women that are doing it to each other. Like, they knew what Justin was doing was wrong. They knew that they were hiding stories. This was literally them just, quote, doing their job. But it's actually harming everybody else by making sure that these sexual harassment complaints weren't known. And to paint this completely different narrative, to instead sacrifice a woman in order to be able to have this narrative going, and also put feminism, specifically feminism, in a bad light. Now, how many times have we, including myself as a millennial here, lamented tabloid culture and pointed out how harmful it was to all of us and to the celebrities that suffered from it? Everyone is too rich, too fat, too thin, too ugly, too everything. But the culture hasn't really gone away, it's more gone into hyperdrive because of places like TikTok and because of how viral internet things just spread like wildfire. And I didn't speak about Blake at the time because I felt that something was off and I just didn't want to start dogpiling on a woman when she'd apologized for a lot of the stuff. And you know me, I'm a big proponent that people can learn, change and grow. So that's for me personally, unless there's something where it's like deeper, that there's nothing for me to actually make a video on. I'm not saying that everybody used to love her because there were definitely detractors to Blake Lively. There were people who, before any of this happened, pointed out her racism in this caption here that she did on Instagram. They've pointed out the issues again, like I said, with the plantation wedding, and they've donated money and apologized for that. I get the criticisms of her past, and it's not my apology to accept, you know, I'm not a minority in that case. I'm on about the people who've suddenly gone like, nope, I hate her now, that's it. And have this valid reason to hate her when you didn't care about that to begin with. It's only because of this dogpiling effect is what I'm pointing out. But don't you know, the worst thing a woman can be is unlikable. Let's talk about the difficult woman. This is a bit of my expertise because I have been the difficult woman and I have borne a brunt of the punishment for speaking up on behalf of myself and for others that have been dealing with terrible work situations. It doesn't make you liked by the higher ups, and it's definitely kicked me in the face because I spoke up about what happened to me and it meant that I got blacklisted myself. And when you live in such a small country like Aotearoa, that really does diminish your career opportunities. So I do get why people are scared of people speaking out about stuff and they threaten them and do retaliatory action. People who speak out and challenge a system are not very well liked because they're not falling for the shame tactic. Oh my god, does shame not work on people anymore? Well, I think that Giselle Pellicoat has certainly been trying to erode the shame that has been put on victims, but it still does happen, doesn't it? If a woman isn't placating and overly nice, super sweet all the time, she's seen as a difficult, ungrateful woman. Like, think about what happened with Chapel Roan recently, which I did indeed talk about. How she's been setting boundaries, how she's not comfortable with people running, screaming, coming up to her, hugging her, taking photos of her randomly. She's not comfortable with that. And even her own fans have been like, well, you should be grateful. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. And it all comes back to this whole, women are meant to endure and suffer and with a smile. Women are meant to be the Cinderella in every situation, whether that's familial abuse, IPV, intimate partner violence, or people around them, like colleagues, friends, just people on the street. If anyone is nasty or mean to you, you're just meant to take that with a smile and just be super polite and just like, oh, it's okay, everything's fine. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want to make the situation awkward for other people. Even though I feel uncomfortable, I'm just meant to absorb all of that. Do you remember Katherine Heigl and how she was like this super famous person in the 2000s? Again, millennial, I remember all of this. She was in a lot of blockbuster movies and then suddenly her career just completely dried up. In an interview in 2008, she made this one critical mistake. She said about her breakout role in Knocked Up, it paints the women as shrews, as humorless and uptight, and it paints men as lovable, goofy, fun-loving guys. Why is this how you're portraying women? 98% of the time it was an amazing experience, but it was hard for me to love the movie. And guess who took that personally? Seth Rogen and Judd Apatow. And she was also seen as too difficult on the set of Grey's Anatomy. Like, she didn't want to accept the award nomination for an Emmy because she didn't believe that her character had done enough to be able to warrant getting an Emmy nomination. And so for many years afterwards, her career had completely dried up. It's only been a bit more recently where she got a bit of a side character in Suits, and also the incredible show Firefly Lane, which if you haven't watched, you really should. It's great. Heavy, heartbreaking, you'll cry, but it's really good. I may have said a couple of things you didn't like, but then that escalated to she's ungrateful, and then that escalated to she's difficult, and that escalated to she's unprofessional. What is your definition of difficult? You may remember Janet Hubert as the original Aunt Viv on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, a show that raised me for sure. Will Smith was the one who got her blacklisted. I can say straight up that Janet Hubert wanted the show to be the Aunt Viv of Bel-Air show, and she was labelled as a difficult woman, which is especially hard for a dark-skinned black woman. It's already hard enough being a black woman in Hollywood, but a dark-skinned black woman? She was screwed after this. Now, they did talk about this in the 30-year reunion where they did patch things up a bit, but the damage was done for her.
But you know those words, calling a black woman difficult in Hollywood is the kiss of death. It's the kiss of death, and it's hard enough being a dark-skinned black woman.
Rose McGowan, we know her as one of the main actresses who came forward in the Me Too movement, right, against Harvey Weinstein. She had to have 3 surgeries on her wrist and elbow after the episode in the hotel room with Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, you can put the pieces together from there. But the thing is that she spoke up about it. I was blacklisted after I was because I said something, but only like internally, you know. I actually have a signed document from the time of the attack. It was settled for a very small settlement, so that's an admission of guilt. Weinstein reached a settlement with McGowan when she was 23 years old. But other than Charmed and the amazing movie Jawbreaker, which if you haven't watched, you really need to. It is so good. I love it. It's very dark at the same time. Without Jawbreaker, Mean Girls wouldn't exist. But she got blacklisted and her career pretty much dried up because she came forward with what happened. She didn't even go to the press about it. This is only when it was internal that this happened happened to her. Let's go way back to the past to everyone's favourite Alfred Hitchcock, the wonderful man that he definitely wasn't. Alfred Hitchcock discovered her and put her in his movie The Birds, which I think you may know, and the filming of which was horrific for her to actually endure. And he also cast her in Marnie, and she rejected his advances, to put it in the most mild way possible, and she said that after Marnie she wouldn't work with him again. And after that, her career completely dried up because Alfred Hitchcock had what? All the power in the industry.
He told me he'd ruin my career. I said, do what you have to do. I don't care. I'm out.
Mirror, mirror, what do we see? Things done to Amber, ashamed should we be? Amber Heard was metaphorically tarred and feathered in 2022. Everybody was sharing memes about it. Everybody was dragging her through the mud. It wasn't a court case, it was a TV show the audience were participating in, where the people who were actually on the jury in the US, they didn't even have their mobile phones taken away from them. They were told, don't look at your phones, but they still had full access, which is that's basically unheard of in a case like this. And we all remember what social media was like at the time, right? Amber spoke up in support of Blake Lively. Social media is the absolute personification of the classic saying, a lie travels halfway around the world before a truth can get its boots on. I saw this firsthand and up close. It's as horrifying as it is destructive. It's important to note that in the UK it had just a judge proceeding, you know, the case that Johnny Depp lost, by the way, whereas the US had a jury and the court of public opinion. And it's very easy to actually sway the court of public opinion, as it turns out. As much as we all like to feel like we're objective, we can all be swayed. This is a common defense tactic in assault and domestic violence trials called deny, attack, reverse victim and offender, or DAVO. The strategy turns the tables on the alleged victim, shifting the conversation away from did the accused commit abuse to is the alleged victim believable? Lawyers and judges tend not to fall for it, but it's very, very effective against jurors, and men are more likely to believe DAVO arguments, but female jurors are also susceptible. And who made up the majority of the jury? Men. Do you remember how viral that trial was? It was irresponsible on the part of the court to actually not sequester the jurors. I want everybody to remember this. Someone not being likable doesn't mean that they can't be a victim of IPV. A victim can fight back emotionally and physically and still be a victim. It's none of this, they both abused each other stuff. No, if you actually look back through the entire history of their relationship, no. And I also want you to remember that not just one gender can be a victim. Look how Terry Crews was mocked when he came forward with what he went through.
This is how toxic masculinity permeates culture. As I shared my story, I was told over and over that this was not abuse, that this was just a joke, that this was just horseplay. But I can say that one man's horseplay is another man's humiliation.
Again, patriarchy hurts everybody, but I've said that before. And I can nearly guarantee you, in a couple, maybe 5 years tops, we will have seen the tide turn and Amber will no longer be seen as this absolute horrible abuser. Especially as more gets learned about these companies that do these smear campaigns, because they are currently very hard to trace. They are so incredibly good at their job, it's pretty scary, honestly. Do you remember Melissa Nathan from earlier and how her company had represented Johnny Depp too? Well, you know how he lost the case in the UK because the evidence showed that he abused Amber? The podcast Who Trolled Amber has been diving into this because it was seeming strange when you find out the dates of when the posts supporting Johnny came from. 50% of the conversation around Amber had been inauthentically generated. Obviously, that doesn't mean there weren't huge numbers of real people who were interested in the case. They made up a majority of accounts tweeting about Depp. However, most just found that they were only posting about the trial a handful of times. Bot accounts, by contrast, were tweeting up to 1,000 times a day, meaning the majority of tweets that were posted were inauthentic. The database of tweets the podcast first digs into were from April 2020 to January 2021, over a year before the US trial began. One 48-hour window proved to be crucial. On the 6th of November, Depp announced on Instagram that he had been fired from the third Fantastic Beasts movie. A week earlier, the UK trial had ruled against Depp, allowing the Sun newspaper to label him a wife-beater. In the 2 days that followed Depp's announcement, a rash of suspicious bot activity flooded the internet. What's significant about this finding is it also took place 15 months before the US trial. Essentially, this suggests that by the time people were engaging with the story, it was already too late. While it remains unclear and unverifiable as to who or what initiated the bot activity, the groundwork had already been laid for her to be damned in the court of public opinion. I'll link the full article for you down below, but what we need to note here is the echoing of what happened with Blake, with the public opinion of Amber Heard already being soured before the crucial US trial happened, having months to fester and grow. Again, many individuals were completely hateful of Amber, but how could anyone really go in with an open mind when the traps had already been laid? It's important that we recognise this because unless Blake had paid for this investigative work to be done, her credibility would be in the toilet, meaning people would be believing that she was just trying to quote play a victim to redeem her ruined reputation and public image. And like I'm showing in this video, the worst thing for a woman to be is unlikable. If you're a bit torn about Amber Heard or you don't think she's a victim of abuse, please go and watch this video by Matt Bernstein. It's incredibly good. Yes, it's a long video because it dives into everything and I do not have the time or the patience to get into it here. And if you're one of the people who say that Amber is making it harder for real victims to come forward, you're actually perpetuating the perfect victim myth. And again, I want to make that whole video on Patreon so I can really dive into it in a deeper way that I will not be allowed to do on YouTube. The bar is higher for some than it is for others. But simply, women are held to a higher standard than men. And remember to add even more scrutiny to someone who's BIPOC or if they're any other sexuality other than straight. The level of prejudice gets higher and higher with each difference from the norm, heavy quotation marks. And I really want you to notice that it's women that do this to each other. We hold each other to these very high standards. We get so angry with women for not behaving properly. Internalized misogyny runs deep, and we all need to do work to undo all of those lessons. The fact it was Sara Nathan and Jennifer Abel who were allegedly behind constructing this smear campaign, and it was mostly female content creators that were calling out Blake and saying what a terrible person she was. And do you remember the interviewer who released her nightmare interview with Blake Lively from a few years ago, and then everybody was like, oh my goodness, how could she treat them so badly when she was just having an off day? How many times have I said it? Don't ask people if they're having babies, don't ask people if they're pregnant. We should just leave people's bodies alone, quite simply. Should Blake have said that? No, because once again, no one knows what health conditions each of us are living with. Everyone's fighting their own battles. But also, this is not a career-ending thing to just have a quick clap back. And this is really strange to me because how many interviews have we had where women get frustrated at constantly being asked about the clothes and their bodies? This interviewer first off commented on Blake's body, and then the next follow-up question was about the clothes, as if those are the only things that women are interested in. We've applauded when other celebrities have called this behaviour out in interviews and not wanted to engage in it, but because of this smear campaign, it's made people have a completely different view in this case. She did the same thing to Amber Heard and she had the hashtag Justice for Johnny Depp at the time. So this is what I mean when I say, it runs very deep. Okay, I've got to rush to my doctor's appointment and I will be back. If I look terrible, it's because the weather is awful and I had a mask on because obviously it's also after Christmas. I don't trust none of y'all. If I suddenly go to voiceover, it's because I had to run off because I'm not feeling well. Anyway, let's keep going. One of the reasons why smear campaigns like this work so well today is because people have been encouraged to get on social media, especially those in the public spotlight, from a young age to be able to get your brand out there. And most importantly, what happens when you put every single bad thing a person has ever done into one easy to digest compilation video, probably even a very short video, clipping out any context, clipping out any growth in between, clipping out time and all the other stuff that goes into, life, because we are like flawed, nuanced human beings. You're disgusted because that's how you're taught to react. And yeah, it does make someone look incredibly bad. And yes, should they apologize for the stuff that they've done? Absolutely. Does this also mean that they can't be a victim? No. It's literally just about balancing all of that because honestly, I don't think there is a single person on the planet that was completely flawless. Even Mother Teresa wasn't. It's also one of the reasons why I do kind of appreciate Philip DeFranco because he's kept up all of his old trash, which he used to make, which he looks back and I was just like, oh, I hate this. Because you can see how someone's changed, learned, and growed. Jeez, oh my god. We really do need nuance to enter the conversation because everyone's got different lived experiences, and I really do think that Blake kind of falls into white women feminism. She has been in the spotlight since she was very young, so she's led a more privileged life than most people. And she wasn't really going to be surrounded by the most progressive kind of people or challenged in very many ways. At least I don't think so personally. I don't know her. This is all speculation. I'm not saying that she's as bad as the characters were in Gossip Girl. What I'm saying is, in terms of like being removed from things, that's definitely more what she was removed from. And so you can see this with the way that she says stuff that is like really off color or even offensive. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna have to take that tree down before it gets pulled down. I'm not saying that people shouldn't call people out for their bad actions. I'm pointing out the dog pile that was happening as opposed to like the calling out as it happens. And that was happening, and sometimes Blake didn't respond to it quite as she should, and sometimes she did, and it's just, like I said, we don't have to like a person for them to still be a victim. As I said to one of my patrons, because they had a lot of problems with Blake, and I fully understand why they do, and I looked up when Blake was using the T-slur, for example, and that was between the dates of 2008 to 2012, and I've got to be completely honest with you, I wouldn't have even blinked an eye at it back then. I've made an entire video series about how sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic, all around disgusting and bullying of a time the 2000s were. How that was like normalized, even though it was not okay to do it then. Even though it was never okay then, it was the oppressor just not giving a toss and forcing conformity through mocking. Like everybody who cared at all about anything was relentlessly mocked. And you know what? I've said this even in my 2000 series. My best friend told me to stop using the R slur because that's absolutely what I was doing. I have to say, like, my peers were doing it, like, saying that was, like, a thing in the 2000s, and I still don't quite understand why it was, but it was just a thing that you said in high school, and so I was a late teenager when she told me about that, and I was like, oh, okay, so I stopped. Yeah, it sucks being pulled up on something, but it's also like, oh, this is how you grow. So that's why I'm saying, like, people can change. I know me as a teenager, incredibly different to me now. But also the stuff that Blake said is not my apology to accept. We still fall for internalized misogyny. Now, I've seen people saying, oh, now I feel bad for saying what I did about Blake because I didn't know this stuff was going on. But that's the thing. This is not the first time this has happened. This has happened to so many women, and we do it to each other. People love to bandwagon and dogpile, especially online, and there is a difference between assessing a situation and just going like, oh, and then this, ooh, ooh. And unless we critically assess things, we can quickly jump to conclusions, and these arguments can be incredibly compelling. Like I said, when you see all of the bad stuff that one person has ever done in one easy to digest compilation, then it's like, well, clearly they're trash. Oof, they're out the window now. Ugh, I never want to see them again. And we've been trained to do this. Like, I think that you can all recognize that you may have felt this way about certain celebrities over time. We need to recognize this happens to defame her, so then it casts doubt on, oh, well, the promising young man's guilt can't be true, right? It effectively shifts the blame. When I say this has happened time and again, I'm going to lay that out for you. Anita Hill came forward about the sexual harassment that she faced when she worked for Clarence Thomas. She was doubted by absolutely everybody, including Joe Biden. And she was also seen as a traitor because she betrayed a black man. No, it wasn't that Clarence Thomas was in a position of power over Anita Hill and used his influence to try and ensure that she stayed silent. Anna Nicole Smith was raked through the coals in the 90s when her husband died. Every possible gold digger accusation about her came out at that time. I've talked about this. She was portrayed as vapid, stupid, evil, manipulative, nasty woman who took advantage of this old man and his riches. No, it wasn't that a rich man found this single mother in dire financial straits and offered her a better life. No. It wasn't that he had more power in the relationship because he had so much money. No. Monica Lewinsky had her reputation utterly destroyed by the press and subsequently everybody else afterwards. This of a woman had sexual relations with the President of the United States. No, it's not that the President had literally the most powerful position in the USA and used that to his advantage to have sexual relations with a young woman who was working underneath him. No, it was all her fault that he cheated on his wife. Pamela Anderson had a private tape of her and her ex-husband having fun together, as you do, as she has rightfully said, and that got leaked to the press. Tommy came through as this absolute champion, and Pamela, instead of people pitying her, people were buying that tape up. And this was used against her for most of her career. As I've talked about in my Pamela Anderson video, I've got issues with her, but so much of the stuff that's happened to her should not have happened. Paris Hilton made a private tape with her ex-boyfriend, and he leaked it to the press. Therefore, it's revenge But because of her inherited wealth and position of privilege, she was regarded as this stupid girl. And it got to the point in the 2000s where people were wishing disgusting things on her. There was even this tagline for a movie to get people to come in droves to see it was, "Watch Paris Die." Rachel from Girl on Film has done this excellent video, which I will link for you down below, which dives into this a bit more too. The pattern is well established. People have fallen into these traps multiple times in the past. And with companies like these doing this back-end work, which is incredibly manipulative to do these smear campaigns where they're barely traceable, I don't really see this going away anytime soon. We're going to look back on stuff and say, oh, how could people be so silly? How could people fall for this? But it's going to happen again and again unless people actually stand up and question things, unless people have a bit more doubt about stuff. It's really important that we recognize that whilst these companies can be doing this nefarious smear campaign in the background, we're ultimately the ones that give it the platform. We're ultimately the ones that keep sharing it. We're ultimately the ones that keep it going. And I'm counting myself as a YouTuber. I'm counting you as an audience member. I'm counting everybody here who has a responsibility in this. Because like I talked about in that big video which I made last week, which kind of destroyed me, we are all capable of breaking the cycles. I've said this many times and people much wiser than me have too. We don't know what we don't know, and we need to have a healthy level of skepticism. I think that that is definitely one of the best lessons that we can learn from this, and recognize the nuance that exists in the world, that you can not like somebody and still recognize that bad stuff shouldn't have happened to them. It's an uncomfortable space to sit in when we're so used to having like the clear good person, the clear bad person, but there is so much grey that happens because nobody is flawless. I have said this for so many years. Like, I even remember back in the day when Jenna Marbles was still on YouTube, she would say, please don't pedestal me. I'm not your unproblematic fave. Nobody is an unproblematic fave. Everybody, you, me, everyone else around you has flaws. Everyone's got room to grow. If we didn't have room to grow, my goodness, what a boring life ahead for us would we have. If I woke up tomorrow at 35 years old and I only had whatever knowledge I had in my brain, I'm never going to develop and critically think further about anything, what would the point be of going on? Honestly, I think that one of the good things in life is actually having to eat that slice of humble pie. Even though humble pie tastes worse than mushrooms and Brussels sprouts with lumpy gravy, it's important for us to eat it sometimes. And you know what? It's also okay to recognize it's okay to be wrong. I think we need to allow each other a bit more grace about being wrong and saying, oh, sorry, I didn't know that. Thank you for educating me. Like, I've said that to some of you because some people have corrected me on something that I've shared in a video. I will either go and edit that out or I'll correct it in a future video. I am completely okay with being incorrect about something, learning and changing. I do my absolute best to fact check everything, but like, none of us are flawless. Like I said, we can always try to be better, and having the assumption that everyone's doing their best and trying their best definitely makes us have a more positive look on each other. When we see that there's all of this bad stuff happening in the press, it's like, well, were they actually trying their best or were they trying to get away with something? Like, when it comes to people like Justin Baldoni, it does make me question them when they've tried to frame themselves in such a positive light. It really does shatter things, and it does make you feel more skeptical, right? Because I definitely feel more skeptical about things, because we like to think, like, I'm always hopeful when I see guys that are questioning the patriarchy, when I see people trying to unlearn stuff. And this dude even had this podcast about it. He had books, he was well celebrated, and yet he was treating Blake Lively like that. Allegedly, he was. Allegedly. Please don't come after me, lawyers. I do not have enough money. I think that being more comfortable with admitting when we're wrong is the best way forward, and to also allow people to be wrong, allow people to change their mind, and allow people to learn from that, because otherwise I don't know how anyone's going to be friends with anybody else at this point. Now, I think the most fitting emoji, since I've been talking about it so much, is a piece of pie, maybe, because humble pie is something that all of us have to eat at different points in our life. When have you had to do that? When have you been wrong about something and someone's pulled you up on it? Or when have you held on to an incorrect belief and someone's pulled you up on it and you had to actually do the work and realize, oh, I didn't know that, that's screwed up. Ugh, sorry, I shouldn't do that. And then you've changed going forward. It's a nasty feeling to sit with. Hey, nobody likes it, but change doesn't come from a comfortable place. And as gross as humble pie is, I think it's important that more people get used to eating it sometimes. And maybe if we fact check things and aren't quite as reactionary, aren't quite as bandwagony, then less of us will have to eat it. But no one's going to be correct about everything 100% of the time. Massive thank you to my patrons who voted on this video topic and the next video topic, which I'm very excited to talk about because I do have an awful lot of thoughts on it. But you'll have to wait and see what that's going to be about. But my patrons really do help to shape the videos you see before you today, and a special thank you to my Trash Panda enablers: Alyssa Pisani, Birgit, Carrie Quake, Danielle, Jam, Laura Bell, Megan Connolly, Mila Gautier, Stella Sapiente, Tammy Poitras, Tim Long, and Tonya Banier. Tell me, do you think that this legal complaint will turn into a lawsuit or not? Because if it turns into a lawsuit, there's going to be even more to say about this, I'm sure. And we'll see some wriggle tactics, I believe. And maybe we'll be able to find out a bit more about these companies that do these smear campaigns, because I think that would definitely be worthwhile. I'm officially feeling too nauseous. I need to go lie down in a dark room. Bye-bye.